So you might say you should have something. This meeting is being live streamed on your screen.
Yep.
And we're live now. And it's about a 20-second delay.
Okay, I'm going to admit everyone who is spectating. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Toronto mayoral debate on Zoom and through live stream. So welcome, however you are joining in. Just a brief matter of housekeeping. We're only going to be hearing from the candidates today. So I ask that if you are observing, please stay on mute and keep your cameras off. And there will be a portion for audience question and answers. We've received some questions in advance, and the chat function will also be available for everyone to use. And let's get this show on the road. My name is Karima Saad. I'm your moderator for this event, and I'm absolutely honored to be here and have this role. I am of the view that debate and discussion is a cornerstone of democracy. And this particular municipal election hasn't really had that many opportunities for candidates to have their voices heard and get their views and platforms across. So I think this is an important event, and I'm very glad to have you all here. As far as logistics, there are a couple of questions, 4 questions that I have prepared in advance. All of the candidates will get an opportunity to answer these questions. I am the timekeeper, and I will be taking that role very seriously so that we are all on our way by around 3:30. And that is the start of it. And I guess we get going. So the first question is going to be for Darren Atkinson, which is, who are you? Why are you running? And what do you uniquely have to offer?
Well, my name is Darren Atkinson, like she said, and I'm running for mayor, obviously. But what I have to offer is a lot of expertise in problem solving in the business world, where there's limited funding, and my reach involves copyright, patent work, but also business marketing. I've brought, I've put factories together in England and China, and I've moved containers around and whatnot. So logistics like that, practical point of view, is what I'll bring, because though the city, you can't necessarily apply business principles to a city. It's about services to the public. But if the city were run like a business a little better, there'd be more money for services. So that's what I want to bring, is that approach to make things work. The budget's going to be $1 billion over, and what's the meaning of services when you can't afford them? So, we need to get our fiscal house in order, and then we can demand more from the province. And we create governments in Ontario, not Ontario. So we need to stick up for ourselves. So when you have your financial house in order, you can have confidence to move forward and get all the services you want. But without that, it'll be defeated in the future. We're heading into a downturn with inflation, and things aren't looking good. I want to do a lot of things, from environmental causes to an Aboriginal park, but it's meaningless if you have no money.
Thank you very much. And now we have the same question for Chloe Brown, which is, who are you, why are you running, and what do you have to offer?
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chloe Brown. I'm 31 years old. I live in the West End, born and raised in Rexdale. And yeah, at 31, I find myself with the question of whether I continue to fight to live here or I fight for my city. This is the reason why I'm running, because as a policy analyst at Ryerson, now known as Toronto Metropolitan University, I've been working for the past decade on the issues of services and programs in the ecosystem of employment. I have dealt with unpaid internships, ageism. I've dealt with the lack of income supports for the free training programs that are offered by government. And the thing that I offer is a behind the scenes expertise about why the things are not working. For the last 8 years, we have been at the mercy of John Tory, who is the lackey of corporate Canada. And this is why policy does not work for working class people. As a policy analyst, I have a strategic, analytical, and coordinating power that will allow me to not only work for Toronto, but navigate and negotiate against the province and the federal government. I believe that I would be the best candidate to do this for you because during my daytime job, I'm working across Canada to build recommendations and programs for the future of work. What that means is that I've been researching and evaluating programs from British Columbia to Atlantic Canada to figure out like, how do we get people with disabilities jobs? How do we get them dignity and income supports that they need when they choose to work? How do we make sure that mothers and potential parents, no matter what part of the sexual spectrum they come from, have childcare? So I'm also looking at like the basic fundamental issues, which is often a deliberate choice by political officials to make the rules so obscure that you cannot access them. And that is why we don't have affordable housing. It's not just developers, it's also homeowners tying up the system with appeals. It's political officials not confronting those who would deny us affordable housing. And for that reason, I am not just a politician, I am a fighter, a coordinator, and an analyst that is going to work for you because that's what I do every day. And I hope to continue doing that for you. Thank you. And that is my time.
Thank you, Chloe. And we will now turn to Sarah Kleimenhaeg.
Thank you, Karima. So I'm Sarah Kleimenhaeg. I'm running because I've been frustrated with the pace of positive change in Toronto, and I want to make a difference. So I think that the approach that I offer is unique, and I think my perspective is unique. I've lived in Toronto for my whole life, and I experience the same problems as many other Torontonians. I wait for the bus just like so many others. I'm not sure if my children will be able to afford to live in Toronto like so many others. I want the parks and our waterfront to be clean because I spend a lot of time in them. And I walk to buy groceries at the local stores every day. So it matters to me when I pass people who are suffering in the street or see businesses closed down. As for my approach, the uniqueness comes from the fact that I'm more interested in solutions than I am in politics or in fighting with those of different political stripes. I offer a genuinely collaborative approach that I've demonstrated every step of the way this campaign. I'm willing to work with everyone who wants progress, not just the people who agree with me. I'm willing to try new things, and I'm interested in the ideas that residents themselves have for solutions. So it's that approach and my direct connection with what matters to me in this campaign that I want to share with anyone else who wants positive change in this city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we have Philip de Cruz. Same question. Who are you? Why are you running? And what do you uniquely have to offer? And I'm just going to unmute you. And there we go. It's not a Zoom call without at least one of these.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Hey, my name is Phil de Cruz. Why I'm running? Because I love the city. I've seen the last 4 years what's been going on since 2018, since the last election, 60% turnout. I've seen what John Tory has done to the city or lack thereof. My story is unique. I used to be a retired member of the Canadian Armed Forces, retired for quite a while. And even though you're retired from the military, if you get called upon to do something, you act upon it, give you a choice. So in March of this year, I was watching my shows and I got a call from the government and they asked me to put my name in. And I was actually thinking about it and I said, why? And they said, they're tired of John Tory misspending money, and they sent me all documents over the wave. So I had access to his documents because of my security clearance. And I said, if I get in, this guy's still win, what's going to happen? They said, we'll back you up. We'll give you a forward guarantee that all working level government, whatever you want, we know you get the job now because of my background. I'm good in finances. I'm good in cutting corners. I know where the dollar goes and how far it gets. I'm for human decency. That's my plateau, the people. You can't start building condos and exteriors. You got to fix what's inside, as you can see in the city. You know, the filth, the lack of stores, the people, the way they're treated. You know, human decency, all of us. We're the regular people, common people. You can't relate with the rich. They don't know where we're coming from. You know, when they say want something done for us, they say on their time. When we want something done, we say we want it now. You know, not tomorrow, not 5 years. Cut the red tape. Housing is so simple. I've offered solutions about temporary housing. There's apartments in this area. There's 1,500 apartment units empty for the last 9 months. I've talked to landlords. I said they can work with the government. They do it just to fill the apartments up. Like we have people in my apartment. There's about 14. with mental instability, the government pays for that. We have over 2,000 empty houses all over Toronto. We can buy those houses, fill them up. It's temporary, gets them off the streets, and it's quick. Condos take forever. I've talked to construction workers. I used to work in landscaping, and they've all told me the same thing. I asked, how long does a condo take? 5 to 6 years. I said, how many low-level apartments can you fix and recreate 4 to 5 levels or more in that time? They said thousands. So I said, what's going on with the condos? They said half of them are empty. They're all being rented out for B&Bs. Land sitting there for 10 years, 12 years, nothing done about it. You know what? Get rid of it. Buy land. It doesn't have to be all in the city. It could be all the wards. There's so many wards, right?
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we turn to Soad Hussain. Same questions. Who are you? Why are you running? And what do you have to offer?
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Soad Hussain. So who am I? I'm 26 years old. I've been born and raised in Scarborough, and I currently live in downtown. Work in a tech company as a project manager. I also work as a scientist as well too. I do research in AI, medicine, healthcare, and some other areas. Why am I running? So, man, there's the simple way to put this is that right now, like as much as we want to be optimistic about how Toronto is, and as much as we see things like, oh, Toronto's like, one of the top cities in the world, and all those other hype, like the people that live in Toronto know that Toronto is becoming a shithole. It's becoming really difficult to live in. It's becoming a mess on every angle. We're seeing afford becoming an issue left and right. We're seeing people becoming more and more homeless, shelters rejecting people on a daily basis, programs getting shut down, services getting reduced. Like everything is just going terribly wrong. And like, as much as these advocates have been doing a fantastic job and everything, and they've been like advocating for like changing all of that, the big issue right now is that the government isn't taking the actions to actually like address those properly. So what I'm trying to do, and the reason why I'm running, is because I want to go into the system, take the actions needed to change those, and also shake up the system as well too. Right now, the way the system's designed is that it's not designed for the people, it's designed for a very specific crowd and only for that specific crowd. And we're seeing how this plays out in like our day-to-day stuff. So I want to change things on both ends, from the policies all the way to like how the processes and procedures and everything operates within the government. So what do I offer uniquely? So there's kind of 3 parts to this one. In being the youngest person running in the elections right now, and being someone that's worked with multiple different people in different areas, whether it's like advocacy and spreading awareness about incarceration in Canada, or it's about projects, technical projects that we deal with in the companies that work with the nonprofit organizations. Like I have a whole range of spectrums that I deal with. And then and having the project management experience, I'm able to deal with people, processes, and procedures, and then be able to optimize those for the better for everyone, which is something I do currently in a paid position that I'm in right now in a tech company. So I want to bring all that over to the government and be able to make the city better for its people and for also the people working in it.
Thank you so much. And now we turn to Isabella Gemk. Who are you? Why are you running? And what do you have to offer?
My name is Isabella Gemk, and I am 62 years old. I'm a disabled trans woman. I am the founder of Proof Protecting ODS POW Funding. I founded Proof Protecting ODS POW Funding in 2018 to demand 100% increase to ODSP and OW benefits because I couldn't believe how the politicians and all these other groups were trying to argue that the 3% was what was necessary for ODSP and OW clients when 100% increase was obviously needed and logically needed. I started working when I was 10 years old, after school, weekends, and holidays for a produce farmer. And I had many different jobs. I became sick and disabled in 1992. I became sick with HIV. I have many other health issues. Some of them are caused by the side effects from the HIV meds. Recently, I've started using a wheelchair. So I'm getting a new perspective on Toronto from the view of a wheelchair. I've been homeless. I've had my fights with addictions, with alcohol and drug addictions. I do have I've had my bouts with the criminal courts when I was younger. I do know I've lived in Toronto housing, so I have a very a good wide lived experience of life at 62 years old. And I want to see people get housed. People have homes. You know, it's a shame what's going on. You know, the more people are forced to rent condos and luxury homes, the more the average market rent goes up. This is a problem. You know, nobody wants, like they were talking about empty units. If you Google it, there's an article that says there is still 1.3 million empty homes in Canada.
Thank you so
So,
much,
you know,
Isabella.
yeah.
Thank you. Okay, and last but not least for this question, we have Robert Hatton. Who are you? Why are you running? And what do you have to offer?
Hi there, I'm Rob Hatton. I want to thank the organizers for this opportunity. I live in Riverside in Ward 14. I know the city as a resident, but also from the inside, having worked there for 25 years in a senior capacity. I achieved a lot in my time there, but I also found there were things I didn't like that I couldn't prevent. But as the mayor, I think I can. As your mayor, I want to increase investment in services. I want to fix our social housing and pay for it by canceling ineffective tax breaks for developers. I want our city to do a better job of leading us on climate issues. And mostly I want the city to stand up for itself on zoning control, on transit planning, on the future of Ontario Place, which strangely is all in the hands of the province. The province is not elected to run Toronto, it's not accountable to us, and because of the reduced council and the strong mayor powers, our councillors have little influence over major decisions between the premier and the mayor. And the implications are not good. In my own community in Riverside, the new Ontario line is being built by the province above ground on a massive berm behind 36-foot walls. The province, through Metrolinx, has said tunneling is too expensive, but it refused the city's request to provide comparative costing data and is tunneling in places where its own figures show it's not economic. And our mayor is silent. So I'm running because I just can't sit back and watch a community get rolled over like that. And I know there are issues like that all over town. Thanks.
Thank you. There is one additional candidate that we are expecting to join us at around 3 p.m. So they will have an opportunity to answer the same questions in a more rapid fire style. And I would remind the candidates that at the minute 30 mark, I will raise my hand on the Zoom platform. So just keep an eye out for that so we stay on time. All right, we're going to switch up the order. So we are starting back with you, Robert. And the question this time is, what do you see as Toronto's biggest challenge, and how would you, as mayor, tackle it?
Okay, well, as I alluded to, I think the big issue for us is relations with the province. I know some people would say it's housing affordability, but I really don't believe the city has much influence on that. It's a market and interest rate driven business, and it's dealing with labor and supply shortage, just like many other businesses. The city can influence the provision of affordable housing rental units using the inclusionary zoning legislation, but only if it can get cooperation from the province, which has a veto. And sadly, under our current mayor, the province has demonstrated it sides with developers almost every time. The province has used the smaller council and strong mayor powers to allow it to deal with the mayor alone behind closed doors. And in this way, the strong mayor system has made the city weak and ineffective. Now, the good news is that there is strength in numbers. Convincing a council is a messy and public affair, as the premier knows, since he and his brother, the mayor, failed time and time again. There's also strength in engaging the broader public in these issues, and our current mayor has further weakened his hand by not doing that. So, as your mayor, I would have council rescind the use of the strong mayor powers. I'd advocate for more councillors, and I'd engage the public in these battles. I'm not afraid to take on a premier who doesn't appear to be acting in the city's best interest.
Thank you very much. And we will now turn to Isabella. What do you see as Toronto's biggest challenge, and how would you as mayor tackle it?
I see, I think Toronto's biggest challenge right now is affordable housing and, poverty leading to homelessness. Affordable housing is not affordable to anybody on ODSP, OW, seniors that don't have income savings and who are relying only on CPP. It's not affordable to anybody on minimum wage. So it's got to be for the middle class, and this is a problem. Only 9% of disabled people on ODSP and 5% of the people on OW on welfare actually live in subsidized housing. This is down from 7% of OW clients and 12% of OW client or ODSP clients 3 years ago. So there's less people on ODSP and OW living in subsidized housing now than it was 3 years ago. These are the numbers according to Income Security Advocacy Center. So this is not really working. I think everybody should have average market rent money. I think the federal government's got to step up and do a lot more. If you look at the share in the pie of what they contribute to Toronto, it's a very skinny slice. I think the federal government needs to invoke the Emergency Measures Act and build 20,400 unit apartment buildings across Canada in one go, never mind 17,000 affordable units that are unaffordable to ODSP, OW clients, other provinces equivalents, CPP seniors that don't have any income, other source of income, or minimum wage earners. So, we have this big problem there. I think that people that are on the streets and dealing with drug addiction and mental health issues should be put into supportive housing right away and given their own space where they stay with a safe drug injection site there with a safe supply and so that they can get their issues dealt with. And not that they go to a safe injection site and then they kick back out on the street and then they go hunting for another dose or something from the street. So, we have to be able to control what's going on. We don't want, if they're going to be coming in for the program to try to get clean, then, I used to have a drug addiction. I went to rehab twice. I got kicked out twice because I used medical cannabis, but I was there for cocaine, but they couldn't distinguish between the two. So, I've been through all these different programs. I've been through different things. I've lived in Toronto housing. When a person with mental health issues gets sleep deprived and has sleep deprivation torture put upon them because of noise from other tenants, and they complain about the noise and management doesn't take them seriously, and the tenant acts out, and they get labeled a problem tenant and then get kicked out, and right away they're on the streets.
We'll park it here for now, Isabella. But we will hopefully return to this issue. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm going to now turn to Soad. What do you see as Toronto's biggest challenge, and how would you as mayor tackle it? For Soad. So we just want to make sure you are unmute.
Yeah, I'm just waiting to get unmuted. So Toronto's biggest challenge is, it's a very general word, but it's livability, right? So the ability to live and the ability to live in Toronto and the condition of living in Toronto. And that's a big challenge. There's multiple different parts to this, right? So affordability is one part of it, trend is another part of it, health services, programs, all of those are other parts of it. So it's like kind of taking all of that into consideration and then using livability as a main challenge. So what would I do to tackle this? This breaks into multiple different components, but first part is creating policies and procedures to help improve affordability within the city. So that's creating, for example, policies to help first-time home buyers to better be able to afford a home. This is also being able to also increase the services and the programs that are offered through changing how the procedures are done to completing those programs and services, whether it's like the paperwork or the tasks that need to be done by the people working city staff. The second part of it has to do with like providing more funding and resources for the programs and services offered by the city. And then also being able to provide them also for businesses, small businesses, and also organizations as well too. So that way they can function more better and be able to serve more people. So this, if for example, involves, for instance, creating workshops for small businesses, so that way they can adapt to the technology that's being released from different companies, and then be able to utilize that to better run your businesses. This also involves like increasing Wheel-Trans services for those with disabilities, and then kind of going from there. And then last part is just optimizing how the resources are used, so that way the space in the city is better used for green spaces, and parks and other things like that.
Thank you so much. We'll turn now to Philip. What do you see as the city's biggest challenge, and how would you intend to tackle it?
Top three things: rents, landlords, food security. My goal is 20% reduction on rent for 3 years. I've got guaranteed by the government. I'll get it done. Lock in for 3 years for all renters: house, homes, apartments, condos, retail. You locked in 3 years, people can save money. They want to get out. They want to buy a house. Food hasn't been challenged by anybody. It's not. I've touched it. You see my platform. I've done a visual platform. I've put emotion there. It's just an idea, but it can be doable. First, pass a bylaw like you do in some of the countries. Illegal to throw out good food. Distribute that food to food banks, shelters, community kitchens, low-income families. Landlords, as we see what's going on with landlords, you got to go after these landlords. You got to raise the fines on these. I've talked to bylaw officers in 311. They say they want more responsibility. Increase the fines, make them accountable. I can tell you horror stories I told before, but that's the thing. My three things are rents, food security, landlords. It's all for the people, and you got to rezone, and you got to do stuff with making more apartments. Condos are great, it's wonderful, but it takes too long. Affordable housing, like the magic word we use every day. We talk about affordable housing like it's a remedy, but you look at the last 8 years, nothing's done. I just heard this morning they're going to cut the library budgets by 6%. Why is that? Libraries depends on a lot of people, low-income families, internet, services, tutoring, all kinds of stuff. That's in all areas of Toronto. You cut that service by 6% and start increasing that, you're going to affect more families. You can get people off the streets. I've said about apartments, empty houses. Isabella made it about 1.5 million houses or sitting empty. Why can't we fill these people up? Forget the land. This land sitting there for 10 years, 12 years, nothing's done about them. They're still deciding. Like the last with Wong, before she left, she wanted this land. They didn't pass the motion, do anything with it. So it's left, for another 10 years. It has to be.
Thank you so much, Phil. Okay, we now turn to Sarah.
Thank you. So I think Toronto's biggest challenge is actually a failure of imagination. I think it's getting in the way of everything. I believe we can end homelessness. We can have affordable transit. We can have more parks, more housing of all shapes and sizes, more music, more laughter. We can have more diverse voices in City Hall and in decision-making. We just all have to realize that change is possible. Because when we think it isn't or decide it's too hard, we hamper our own efforts. And the media coverage in our elections right now is an excellent example of this failure of imagination. Most of the media coverage that we've all experienced focuses on what the problems are and how difficult it is to solve them. Yet the articles and headlines themselves reinforce status quo candidates, status quo approaches, and status quo limits. So this debate today is a direct result of my belief that more is possible, that each of us candidates and each of the audience have amazing things to offer. All that we need is for people to listen, to share their own ideas, and to know that we can make things better. And then there's no limit to what we can do. Thanks.
Thank you. Chloe, we hand it over to you now. What do you see as Toronto's biggest challenge, and how would you tackle it?
So, in my opinion, I believe that the biggest challenge that we have is a lack of democracy. We are at peak capitalism. The working class cannot produce any more goods for the corporate class at this point. We've been squeezed out effectively like lemons for lemonade. And the only way to reverse that is through the centering of democracy. We need to decentralize capitalism as the main form of governance, social contract, and get back to democracy. And what that means is, my first point is like changing the property tax system. So every year the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation comes and they assess your land, and based on the properties on the land, they tax you. I'm proposing phasing that out for a land value system. It would only tax the land. This way it would be in line with the zoning reforms from the expanding options to housing report, which addresses the missing middle, which is multiplexes. So you need to also address not only like the rules of zoning, but you need to change the incentive as to why people were not renovating on their properties. That is my first step of democracy. The second one is to take money from like John Tory's overpaid consultants, the Deloittes, the KPMGs, and to also reduce a lot of the departments that he made for his friends. So one of them is like Create TO, which handles real estate, even though we already have a real estate department. Reduce the duplication and redundancy, take that savings and directly put it into communities through the form of participatory budgeting. There's enough talent and know-how in our communities so that we could be giving people the money to build those micro, small, and medium-sized projects. The thing that's standing in the way is a weak government, not even weak government, but weak political officials that are more yes men than they are strategic. And John Tory is a good example of that. He says yes to everything. Therefore, we cannot objectively reach any of our goals because we're too busy trying to be nice to everyone. Meanwhile, there are people dying in the streets. So it's also just like putting people first, and that's democracy for me. And I plan to do that by like fighting for the people and fighting against the capitalist policies and rules that govern us. So
thank you so much, Chloe. And Darren, we will finish with you. Same question. What do you see as Toronto's biggest challenge, and how would you, as mayor, tackle it?
Well, I think we'd have to take a look at the timeline. Unfortunately, where we're sitting in time, we might like to do a lot of things, but unfortunately, the next year to 2 years is going to be a downturn, whether we like it or not. With interest rates going up, the budget way over, like I said, $1 billion. I mean, we won't be able to fund these things. So what the mayor needs to do is we need to make the city, affordable. The cost of living is really what it boils down to for the average person. I don't want to pick on the rich, the developers or whatever. I just want people to pay their share. And really what the mayor has to do is be service to the council and then run interference with anyone that gets in the road. I'm not affiliated with any party at this point. I'm disappointed provincially and federally. I'd like to run interference with anyone that gets in our city's road. So you could just see me as an independent that would basically, if the province, whether it be one party or another, is not going to give us what we want, then I say don't vote for them. If they want to do things, I'll make it hard for them on the permit level. I'll take all the heat. The council can decide what they want, but I don't see, Mayor Tory does go along with things. I think at one point he was a valid politician, but his best before date's over. And right now he's not willing to run interference with the province or the feds. You have to demand more. If you're either for the people of Toronto or you're not. It's as simple as that. In the next 2 years, the number one problem is going to be financial survival, especially for small business. And that'll trickle through to everything. If you can get that under control and start to balance the budget by making people pay they should, like foreign money. I want to put a 20% surcharge on any foreign investment firm and then just resist them at the permit level. Every single permit. If the OMB wants to deal with every single permit issued in Toronto, you can try and do that. But we have to play hardball. And that's what the mayor should be doing. Then, the department heads and the people that are civil servants for long after elected officials are gone, they can do their jobs. So the mayor's job is to be of service to make this city affordable for everyone to live in. And I don't want to pick on the richer developers. They just got to pay their share. People have to be good corporate citizens, gig working apps and whatnot. Car sharing. I used to have a cab license. It's ridiculous. Just make people pay their share. There's enough to go around.
Thank you so much, Darren. Much appreciated. We will bounce right back to you, though, for our next question, which is, where do you see Toronto's biggest opportunity, and how would you take advantage of that? And I'm going to unmute you. There we go. Oh, we still can't hear.
There, I just unmuted myself.
There we go. I'm restarting the clock and let's do this. Biggest
Okay.
opportunity.
Biggest opportunity. It may very well be the youth of the city. There's a young generation coming up, and we're supposed to leave this place better than we found it, right? So one of the things I would propose would be in every opportunity to create some kind of innovative incubator. And that might even involve creating buildings or residences where people can have the first 12 months free rent, even if they come from out of the country, right? If you bring your patent here, if you're an innovative lab, if you're a maker, printer, designer, you know, link all these people up with the people that do marketing on social media. Let's move to the future that's modern. You take a look at a place like South Korea where they invest more into R&D. The government's actively involved. Look what they've done. They were ahead of everybody with, you know, broadband, and, you know, we can do that too. And that's with our young generation. So we got to prepare them for that and build a place for them to happen so they can bring the modern jobs here. Preparing people at college and university for jobs, you know, even in the legal sector, they're being replaced on the internet. I'm a musician in my background. I'm a drummer. I was replaced by a machine in the 80s. You know, we gotta accept reality and move to the future. You know, we're not going to be building cars, you know, maybe 40 years from now in the way that we think we are. We might not be building them at all. So if you don't move to new industries and you don't create an incubator for young people, and then you branch it out to, you know, educational, you know, all the educational means possible. Libraries, for example, everyone should have a maker printer. My son went to a school, they had a maker printer, no teacher knew how to run it. There should be one in every library available for somebody. This is the way of the future. I mean, people are going to be making parts literally in their, like, you know, the way that things are going to be distributed in the future is going to change. They won't even necessarily be coming from Amazon. You'll be able to make it yourself. You'll be able to download the plans and build a part for your fridge from LG or something like that. I mean, basically it's coming, whether you like it or not. And cars will be valid, they'll all be electric. You know, at the end of the day, we can pick on cars and trucks, but soon we'll have a whole different set of vehicles on the road. So much has to be done. And that we could lead in that, you know, ultimately with battery technology, and even companies, there's companies in Toronto that are building electrical charge stations, anything like that. That's the future, has to be the focus for young people. Otherwise.
Thank you, Darren. Chloe, we turn to you. What do you see as an opportunity, and how would you propose to take advantage of that? And I'm just going to make sure that you are unmuted.
Okay, so I think one of the biggest opportunities is changing zoning reform. As someone who grew up in an apartment building in Rexdale, it's like there's little opportunity for like stores at the bottom of your building. There's little opportunities to create a business in your apartment. So changing the way that we understand the zones of imagination and creativity and entrepreneurship is very important. When I was speaking to ECE workers and midwives, one of the things that they need is low-cost space. One of the things that I'd like to do is change the zoning of industrial commercial spaces so that we can have more mixed use, more mixed income spaces, so that we can close that gap between work, services, educational institutions, incubators that exist, like Darren has been speaking of, so that people can actually do the things that they want to within 15 minutes of their home. There's so much opportunity with flexible work that we can be using these rezoned spaces for affordable childcare so that we can get women in and out of the workplace while they, and men, because men do need affordable childcare. They need to be able to take their children to childcare, go to the office, come back, get groceries, and we can do that, but we need to change the way that we've designed the city. It's residential one area, it's employment the other, and these old laws are really ruining the future because they separate us. So this is why I emphasize policy, because policy is really about the rules that govern the people. If we're living by rules that were from the 1970s when my parents and grandparents came, of course, we're never going to have affordability because it's no longer congruent with reality. So that's where I think the biggest opportunities are, just changing the rules so that we can change the state of play from housing to recreation and transportation. It can be inclusive, but it's about us informing the policymakers and the elected officials that we need accessibility, inclusivity, and universality of access.
Thank you so much. Sarah, your question. What do you see as Toronto's biggest challenge, and how would you take advantage of it? Oh, same issue. We're 3 for 3 now. We want to make sure that you are unmuted so we can hear you.
I was just saying that, so Toronto's biggest opportunity we're talking about right now. And I say our biggest opportunity is our people, kind of following on from what Darren said about our youth. And I would say our people, we're a city of 3 million and growing, and every one of us has knowledge of problems and ideas on solutions. Just in this group today, we have so many people identifying amazing opportunities. So our biggest opportunity is our people. We have a city of people who know how to build, to make music, to design clothing or sewage systems. We have nurses, we have teachers, police officers, dancers, cooks, garbage collectors. We have children who know how to create fun out of any situation, and older adults with the wisdom of life experience to offer. We have communities with roots of thousands of years here on this land, and communities of people who have come from thousands of kilometers away to make Toronto their home. So celebrating each other's differences and a recognition of what each of us have to offer is the way forward. We share frustration, sadness, and anger when things don't work the way we think they should. And we might differ on the specific solutions, but we are united around the end goals of having housing for all members of our city, of having streets that are safe and easy to navigate, of having strong local businesses, of having parks, clean air, and clean water. And we're also all united in our desire to be compassionate, understanding, and to not cause harm to others. So if we work together from those values, there's nothing we as a city can't do. So I guess how I would take advantage of that is by things like participatory budgeting that Chloe mentioned, by referendum on local decisions, by including residents in all the ways, not just sort of formalized public consultations that half the people can't come and the other half don't enjoy, but by meaningful public consultation with, food provided, childcare provided, going to people's doors, every way of consulting with them where they are. Let's do that. And that's how we can take advantage of those opportunities.
Thank you. Philip, we're going to hear from you next. What do you see as the city's biggest opportunity, and how would you seize that? And I'm just going to send you an unmute request.
Okay, great. I apologize if you hear any noise in the background. They're renovating the apartment next door. I'm sorry about that. So anyways, I'm going to add to Sarah and Darren and Chloe, Tappa, people, communication. I've talked to different groups, ODSP, progressive, socialism. Why aren't there enough committees in City Hall talking ideas, sharing? See, the people don't trust the city anymore. That's the biggest problem. When it says City Hall, take the H off, say City Hall, not City Hall. We got to communicate, talk about crime. We should have talks every day. Not just the dignitaries handpicked, everyday people. Every word is different for every situation. Communication, put the trust back in the people. Depend on the people. Look at COVID. Look how many people stood out. You see all the stories, helping each other out. That's what's missing in the compliance of City Hall. Trusting the people, work with them. Say, listen, we need your help. We got an idea, let's add it to yours. You got an idea, let's add to ours. Let's make it work. Trusting the people, you can get the housing. They've all talked about housing, affordability. Services is the biggest thing. You cut services like the libraries that we just done. You know what? That's saying to the city, saying we got to slap you in the face. You're low income. Sorry, you're on your own. It doesn't have to be like that. You're not on your own. That's why it's called all of us, Toronto. One people, one voice, big hearts. And all these people here, all these mayor candidates, they all have one thing: big hearts. You all got one heart. That's what's missing City Hall. One big heart, not just little divided hearts in City Council. They've done good work, but you have time to move on. And these people have been there 25 years, they're all set in their ways, right? The rust is settling. Let's shut up, put some brass on there, right? Communication with the people, work with the people, create services, committees, communication. That's what it's all about. We want to hear them, right? When people march to City Hall and it's pouring rain and they're outside, that's ridiculous. I'm mayor, I say, you know what? Open the bloody door, let them in. Don't stand out in the cold. There's an old East Coast saying. You're from East Coast. I lived there for 2 years. An old East Coast saying. There's always room for the table for one. There's always one for one, and it never ends, right? As soon as you say, I can't let you in, you're not working your job. You take an oath to serve your city, and you're ignoring people's services, and you don't make phone calls back to them, you know what? You took the wrong oath. You should have been a part-timer.
Thank you very much. Okay, We will now go to Isabella. Same question. What do you see as Toronto's biggest opportunity, and how would you propose to seize it? And I'm going to make sure you are unmuted. There we go.
All right. I think Toronto's biggest opportunity is to make it into a more livable city for people. At the moment, John Tory's kind of wrecked it downtown. I'll get back to that in a minute, but I want to go back to the soundproofing. So I've talked to security guards, in Toronto community housing buildings, and they've told me that some of them work in other condos and newer buildings, and they say they have the same problem. That a lot of people get woken up, from people above or below, and or from outside. So we need buildings soundproofed between floors and on exterior walls. So the building code should be changed going forward for buildings going forward, because we don't need to build more buildings with the same problem, because security and police, they don't need to have to deal with this, and landlord and tenant boards don't need to deal with this constantly when it could be it's a fixable solution. When people don't get REM sleep, it affects their health, and when it affects their health long term, they end up with medical problems and issues, and that adds to medical costs. So there's so much benefits of soundproofing buildings. There's so many studies been done. We need to start using scientific data and studies to improve our city, and not just whatever people want and think that is a good thing, because a lot of times people, whatever they think is not turned out to be a good thing. I think that properties that are left vacant for 10 years or something, it should be or urged, the city should urge to the owners to sell them, as undeveloped properties, even if they have a building on them, because they're not being used, they're not being developed. I think going forward, if somebody is buying a building as a residential building, that they have a year and a half to renovate it, and then they got to have somebody living in it within 2 years. And that's how we stop the empty vacants, the empty unit stuff. We do need rezoning in the suburbs, that we can increase density. That's for sure. Everybody can't have. This is a new world. You know what I mean? We got to be more fair. So we can't just keep urban land sprawl. The 413 highway should not be going.
Thank you, Isabella. And we will now go to Robert. What do you see as an opportunity, and how would you take advantage of it? And I've sent it.
Sure. I think the city could present itself in a much better way if it finally came around to increasing spending on services. We've been cheap since amalgamation, and it's starting to show. I'm sure you're aware of the article in the Toronto Star recently about messy garbage bins. Well, last week I did a short video in Nathan Phillips Square, and behind me, rats were running around snacking on litter. Well, behind the camera, a filthy and struggling guy who'd been sleeping on the sidewalk was yelling. And all this is happening at the City Hall. It's just not very impressive. The same, frankly, can be said about Metrolinx running amok in our streets. It proposes to close Queen Street in front of City Hall for 5 years, or maybe 10 if they get delayed. And if that isn't a civic disaster, I don't know what is. Ontario Place, a gift to the people by our premier in 1971, is proposed to become a giant indoor water slide park like those ones have in Niagara. Meanwhile, the population's doubled, the downtown population has surged, tourism has declined, and we need that park more than ever. So what are the opportunities? Well, we need a mayor with a vision for a waterfront park that's accessible to all and not just cars, a transit system that works for the people and not against them, an affordable housing plan that achieves something more than tax giveaways. And we need it this time in less than 8 years. So to me, it's all about services, and we haven't been getting them.
Thank you. And we'll end this round with Saad.
Right. So in terms of the biggest opportunity that Toronto has, it's actually breaks into two. So the first part is the space, and the second part is the people. So for the ones that at least that have been canvassing like myself, you'll notice that a lot of areas within Etobicoke, North York, and Scarborough, they're not being used properly. Like all the emphasis that has been made in terms of development and activities and opportunities and everything has been focusing mainly on downtown, while the other areas haven't got as much attention and as much as development as needed. And as a result, you just have a bunch of empty spaces or spaces that aren't being utilized properly or to their maximum potential, which is like leaving out on a bunch of opportunities for businesses, nonprofits, arts activities, artists, and all these other types of individuals. So that's one side to it. And the second part is the people. Like we have amazing people that live in Toronto with all different sorts of skills, talents, connections, and everything else. But the problem is we're not using them to the best of their abilities, which is where the democracy part does play a heavy role in this, and getting these people actually utilized through like getting their voices heard and getting their opinions integrated within the decisions that we make to develop the city and improve its facilities and services and other things. So those are like the two areas that I feel like we have the biggest opportunities. And how would I take advantage of that is exactly like what I was describing. So the first part is working with these different types of individuals that live in the city that have different expertise in different areas and that represent different areas, and then utilize the space that we have in these different areas of Toronto and then make them more better for businesses and people alike and nonprofits and others.
Thank you. The last question that we have prepared in advance is, what is your perspective on spending and taxation user fees in Toronto? And we will go reverse alphabetical order this time, which means that we go back to you, Saad.
Sure. So in terms of spending and taxation, so for spending, there definitely is a better way that Toronto can spend its money. Right now, there's a lot of areas that we're currently putting money into, and areas that shouldn't be, or in parts that shouldn't be put into money. So Chloe actually mentioned this actually in her speech, where it was like, for example, there's a lot of duplicate effort that's being made within the city, and then because of that, we spend a lot of money unnecessarily in doing the same activity, but through like two different departments, for example. So when it comes to spending, we need to change how the city is spending money and take the money that's being used in, for example, these kinds of activities, and then reallocate them into programs and services that are used heavily by the population, including those in low-income families and marginalized communities. So that's my stance on spending. And in terms of taxation and user fees, unfortunately, if there was a way not to tax people and be able to get everything functioning without using taxes, then it would be fantastic to go with that route. But we do need the taxes and the money collected from people to be able to run these programs, services, and run the city altogether. And that's why I do support like taxation in that case. When it comes to increasing taxation or user fees, that's something I don't support. We already have taxation very high right now, and it's already difficult for people to live on a day-to-day basis with inflation and everything else. So that wouldn't make any sense. But just like having taxation there right now, like the one we have in place, is something I do support. And using that money that we attain from tax from the population, be able to use them best on things on improving infrastructure, roads, the public transit, TDC, and other things within the city.
Thank you. Rob, same question for you. What are your thoughts on spending and taxation user fees in Toronto?
Sure. Before I get started, I just want to make sure you're aware that another candidate joined us.
He did, and then he unlinked, but I think he'll be back at 3.
All right. And then I wanted to also thank the audience for sticking around for this, because I think it's great that you're paying attention. One of the things I was responsible for at the city was the design and introduction of new taxes under the City of Toronto Act. I spent a lot of time considering which ones worked and what didn't, and defending my recommendations to the mayor and council and interest groups. Property taxes can be an excellent way to raise revenue for local services, but they can quickly get out of hand when the city becomes responsible for income redistribution and social services like housing. And then some services are just too expensive for the local community, and too important, like transit. And finally, tax breaks, which are a huge thing in this administration, are often terrible policy. There's no accountability and no formal reporting of costs and outcomes. So as mayor, I would eliminate most tax breaks and invest the proceeds in services. There are about 400 million in annual tax breaks that aren't doing much for anybody. I would advocate for restoring a fair provincial contribution towards transit operations, removing the cost of social housing from the property tax base, and I do that with our municipal partners across the province. And I would reassess fees, which have gone up without constraint for 20 years, while successive administrations have focused only on controlling property tax increases. So that's what I stand for. Thanks.
Thank you kindly. Isabella, your question. What's your perspective on spending and taxation user fees in Toronto?
Most of I wanted to first say that what the other candidates are talking about, I love a lot of their ideas, and I would implement a lot of them. One thing I've noticed around Toronto is there's businesses that offer, if you don't pay taxes, you pay less. When this is a business taxes, whatever, it's not really municipal taxes, but it affects what the government, the federal and provincial governments can give us, in return. I would like to see the TTC free. When you go on it and you see half the advertising spots empty, I think if you made it free, you could increase ridership. This would make the advertising spots more valuable. They talk about accessibility. Well, when you only have one elevator on a subway platform and it breaks down, it's not accessible. There should be 2 elevators on every subway stop. When I talk about livability in Toronto, downtown, the benches have disappeared. There's no trees. There's no spot for dogs, service animals to go pee. Nobody's pet to go pee. There's the real issues that are people. It's not people friendly. I would cut the police funding and tell them to get rid of the horses. This is just a prestige thing. We don't need that. They can use e-bikes instead. E-bikes, you can be charged. You don't have to feed them hay. You don't have to train officers how to ride them and how to handle them, in crowded situations. Stop the tax breaks. I agree with, what else was there? When you say things like, oh, they won't do that, it gets back to them and they say, you know what, they don't expect us to do that, so we're not going to do that. So please stop saying they won't do that. The government will never do that. Start saying, you know what, we demand the government do that, and let's move forward and let's get things done. So if you want to know more about my platform, you can Google me. You can look me up on Facebook and Twitter. You'll find out all about me. So thank you very much. And thank you for having me on this debate.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. All right, we now turn to Philip. What are your thoughts on spending and taxation or user fees in Toronto?
There we go. Okay. Sorry about the noise. We waste so much money. I got 2 accountants in the military. If I get elected, I gotta come in, go through all the books. I got an accountant or BMO. She's certified. Freeze everything. I want to know where the money's going. Where's it going out? Back in 2014, when John Tory came in, I got all the paperwork from the government. $20 million went to work with the homeless. Where did it go? Went disappeared. They got $400 million last year for affordable housing. I don't even remember that. Where did it go? Why are they asking for? See, John Tory doesn't have any guarantees of all these promises in the election. Because I've asked him, let's see the paperwork. The reason he doesn't have a relationship with these people is they don't trust them. If you establish from the beginning with any government, they see you're spending your money wisely, putting it where it's supposed to be, there's a relationship. He doesn't have any relationship, any levels of government. Because you see his promises, he's going to say, I'm working with all levels of government. There's no guarantee what he's going to get. Misspend money, $40 million on consultation. What the heck is that? That hotel, how much, $15 million wasted? Useless spending, tax write-offs, put it back in community services. $400 million affordable housing, where they kind of gone. Taxes we have to do, unfortunately, it pays for services, right? Well, people always ask me, the biggest frustration, as Robert says, they ask, where's the money going? We pay our taxes. Where's it going? Let's show them where it's going. Let's make lists. Let's show them, hey, you pay this, it's going to the service. Then they feel better about it. They're willing to pay the taxes. I've talked to people who just want to know where it goes. So right now, they don't have trust in the city council where the money's going. It's not coming out. It's not coming back in the community. It's all for the community. Toronto's all community. Community housing, Ontario housing, Metro housing, all for community, you know?
Thank you. Sarah, we turn to you now. Your perspective on taxation, user fees, spending in Toronto.
Okay, so I think we all agree that the things we want in our city do need to be paid for. And in general, my principle on budgeting is just that we charge for what we don't want and we don't charge for what we do. So I think we should be making it easy and cheap to ride transit, to hold a street festival, to add an apartment to your home, to create a community garden. It should be easier and cheaper to find a new home for what you don't want than it is to dump it on the corner, dump it in our parks, dump it in the waste management system. It should be easier and cheaper for businesses to take full responsibility for what they produce and expensive to dump their used products in our parks or our waste systems. And it should be easier for developers to create innovative and beautiful buildings that provide truly affordable housing than it is to provide luxury condo towers. So the question is always, how do we decide on our budget, both spending and taxes? And I think we need to bring that question directly to the residents. What do we want to pay for? And how do we want to pay for it? Like Philip was pointing out, the summary alone of our city budget is 900 pages long. So it's simply impossible for most of us to understand what does happen to our money when we hand it over. To expect residents to do so unquestionably, especially in times of economic pressure, is unreasonable, and it's led to that pressure for ever lower taxes and spending that inevitably end up with cuts that hurt people. So I trust that by making residents part of this budgeting process, we will have a richer city with better services for us all. Thanks.
Thank you. Chloe, your turn to tackle this one. What is your perspective on spending, taxation, and user fees in the city?
Okay, so I'm so sorry that I'm about to play devil's advocate, but the illusion of free comes from capitalism because it's a right and a responsibility that balances the perception of free. Like, you don't get a free sample. Someone had to work to get the food there. Someone had to work on the marketing. Free is just the marketing of stuff. If we want to have our rights to public service honored, we have a responsibility to pay our neighbors fairly. And if you've been looking at the news, corporate Canada has been running away with tax dollars, hiring accountants, lawyers to avoid paying taxes. So it's not about whether or not people don't know where their tax dollars are going. They know where they're going. You're getting robbed by corporate Canada. And that's as simple as it is. So it's like, my plan is tax stability. Getting churches to pay taxes on the land that they occupy is a very big issue for me. I don't know if you've ever seen the Prayer Palace, but it takes up a lot of land north of Steeles. And if they're not getting taxed, why are individuals subsidizing that lack of tax dollars? We need to make sure that everyone is contributing, not just individuals, but the institutions like charities, nonprofits, churches, etc. Secondly, what we really need to do about taxes is, when we talk about our economy, it's like 98% small to medium-sized enterprises. However, when it comes to worker training investments, Canada ranks at the lowest of G8 countries. So it's like, there's no wonder why people cannot afford to get training to get better jobs and subsidize those things. What I'm proposing is a 1% surtax called Loi sur la compétence. It's from Quebec. And what they do is charge 1% on every payroll over that reaches $1 million to create a workforce development fund that workers can use to access income supports, childcare, and various things that workers would need to make that economic transition up the ladder. So it's about making sure everyone contributes and making sure that there is a trust fund available to all working class people, so that if they ever find themselves in emergency and crisis, that service is universally accessible. It speaks to accessibility and that it's inclusive of every diverse need that happens, because life happens and we should be there as neighbors to protect each other from the chaos that can happen from neglect.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Thank you. Darren, you get the last word on this issue, which is the matter of spending and taxation and user fees in Toronto.
There, we're unmuted. And Chloe's right. I mean, you do have to collect tax to pay for these things. They don't, they're not free. But the one thing I'd like to address is spending. For example, we need to revisit where we spend in every department. One of the things I've always wondered, because I used to put in the lottery to try and live there, is Toronto Island. I mean, I hate to say it, there's like 250 to 300 residences, and the subsidy it costs to maintain that outside of the public's use of the parkland and the ferry, it's ridiculous. They either have to pay their share, for example, and that would be just one thing. But there's a lot of things like that in Toronto that are grandfathered in. I mean, Metro is, 56 years old. Actually, we have the same birthday, 1966. We're both old. And the bottom line is we got to rethink a lot of these old grandfathered laws. They just don't work anymore. Or grandfathered behavior. I'm not sure what it is. We just don't do anything about it. So, for example, if it costs money to maintain a service and the people aren't contributing, they're going to have to contribute. If the service is not worth it, then we'll have to abandon it. Taxation, yes, I think we need to tax, but I think we're going to have to freeze it during the next 2 to 4 years, because people won't be able to afford to pay. They just don't have the money. Spending, spending, taxation, these things go hand in hand. User fees, I think they'd be frozen too, because I mean, the average person is going to need to survive the next 2 to 4 years. So, how far I can forecast in the future, I'm taking a flyer here. I'm going out into the future. I think that for the next 2 to 4 years are a lot different than we feel right now. They're going to start feeling different come next spring and next fall. And ultimately, people need to financially survive. However, we can get that under control by making sure we don't waste money on spending, or we don't subsidize things like Toronto Island residents and other things in the city we shouldn't be. In the meantime, we can actually tax outside forces. We always talk about what's internal, but gig working companies, retailers that put out plastic products, we can start creating fees on things. And the other people that won't live by the rules and give us big carbon footprints and hand over all these plastic items to us, they're going to have to pay. Foreign investment companies and foreign investors that sit with empty condos, they're going to have to pay. Running interference.
Thank you, Darren. While we have Nia Singh, who has joined us, so I am going to ask him the same series of questions. During this time, if you have questions for the candidates that you would like me to put to them, please plug that into the chat, and we will do our best to get to as many as possible with a view towards ending at around 3:30. So Nia, I'm going to start with the introduction, which is tell us who you are, why you're running, and what you uniquely have to offer Toronto.
Thank you. And I just want to say to all the viewers, and first of all to Sarah, thank you for organizing this debate. I apologize. I've had a legal conference that was scheduled in months in advance of this debate, so I could not change that timing. I'm still actually in it, but I've stepped away in order to contribute to this discussion. So thank you for having me, and I'll answer the first question. Why am I running, and what do I uniquely have to offer? I'm running because I see a huge divide in the gap in Toronto between government and the everyday citizen. And it's the same reason I ran in 1997 when I was 23 years old. I was concerned with the fact that there's a disconnect, and the average everyday person does not understand what government is doing, and they are disconnected from the services and what the city has to offer. I want to be able to be a representative of this city that actually brings people together and actually provides solutions to age-old problems that we've had for decades, specifically violence. I find that my experience as a music producer and a person who provided co-op placements for young people for over 20 years in Toronto, operating one of Toronto's most busiest hip hop recording studios, I've been exposed to issues that involve Metro Housing and Ontario Housing, and how poverty actually is a contributor to violence, and how our education system hasn't really worked for a lot of our youth. I'm running because our city is a diverse city with over 52% of people of color. And I find that our city council does not reflect what our city looks like. By running for mayor, the position of mayor isn't one that is going to be making all of the decisions that we speak about. The position of mayor is somebody who represents the city locally and abroad. And I think that with my experience, with my skill sets, and with my connection to various aspects of Toronto, that I would be a very good representative in order to bring the change that Toronto needs.
Thank you. Thank you. We will move to the next question, which is, what do you see as Toronto's biggest challenge, and how would you as mayor tackle it? And I've just sent a request to unmute.
Okay. For me, Toronto's biggest challenge are twofold. For me, the priority is violence in the city. We've seen a spike in violence, especially with knives. It's not only about guns. And this is why I always say we need to get to the root issue and take the desire for violence out of people rather than keep trying to put band-aids on top, which are stiffer penalties or more police. That's not going to solve the issue of violence. And what's interconnected with Toronto's major problem is affordability. And I can tell you that as prosperous as Toronto is, if we allow the violence to continue and it spreads beyond the areas that people think it's contained to, which it has already in the past with the Danforth shooting and other things, this is going to affect property values. And we've seen what has happened in the past to great cities such as Chicago and Detroit. They were once prosperous, and then issues of poverty and violence actually made those cities become places that are undesirable, and a lot of things have shut down. Toronto, as great as it is, has a risk of doing that if we allow these things to get out of control. So to me, that's the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is getting Toronto residents and politicians to understand that quality of life takes precedence over profit. And that is one of the most important things. We focus too much on economic development and not enough on social development. And with all of the resources we have, we can do a much better job in this city.
Thank you. The reverse, actually, what do you see as Toronto's biggest opportunity, and how would you as mayor take advantage of that?
Toronto's biggest opportunity is most definitely its diversity. We must be the most multicultural city in the world. And the fact that we are that, we know that in Toronto, you can go out and get almost any type of food that you want. You can find access to almost any type of entertainment you want. We have a large city that is spread out with the surrounding GTA that supports it. And that is our biggest opportunity. We should be one of the major hubs for tourism. And in the summer times, sometimes we have that. We have the two biggest performers in the world. We have Drake and The Weeknd out of Toronto. We have the Caravana Festival. We have OVO. We have Pride Parade. We have Taste of the Danforth, which must be reinstated for next year. But what I have been saying and what I noticed is our diversity is our greatest strength. And it's very unfortunate that in past years, our previous mayors have removed that from our motto. But that is something that Toronto's biggest opportunity is. Capitalize on the diversity, get other people to visit our city more often so our economic development can increase and we can employ more people. We have so many young people who have a lot to offer, but time is running out for them to secure employment and careers. And to me, diversity is the greatest opportunity we have.
Thank you. And the last question, what is your perspective on spending and taxation or user fees in Toronto?
My perspective on spending, taxation, and user fees are absolutely that Toronto, with a 14 billion plus budget per year, spends way too much on salaries. We spend almost half of our budget on salaries, and that takes away money that's available for other resources, such as social development, such as housing, affordable housing, you name it, mental health support. When we spend that much money on salaries, we should be ensuring that the salaried positions that are being paid for it are effective. Far too often, we understand that government actually is a place where people unfortunately can sit around and collect a paycheck without doing much work. And that is something as mayor that I would ensure that I investigate and make sure that our money that we're spending on salaries is going to good use. If I apologize, my dog is in the background having a little fit there, so don't mind him. Excuse me.
You muted yourself there.
Sorry, I just didn't want the dog's noise to disturb. But my point is taxation and spending. We must have responsible spending. We must analyze where our positions, our money is going, and put into more useful places.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we've now heard from all of the candidates, and I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be so thoughtful in their responses. And this is actually energizing to hear all sorts of ideas that don't seem to be getting a ton of airtime, but nonetheless, we have found an audience for this, and I hope that some of these concepts and platforms can spread farther. For this Q&A portion, everyone has 45 seconds to answer. If a candidate wants to tackle a question, we won't, I don't think, get to everyone for every question. But if it speaks to you, please raise your hand either virtually or just signal to me. We do have a few questions that have come in here into the chat. So we'll actually start with those. And the first one from, well, we'll leave them anonymous, but how would you push the city to meet its commitments on the international stage? For example, fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, 880 cities, zero food waste, vision zero, etc. So do we have anyone who wants to take a shot at that? Oh, okay, everyone. Let's start with Robert, and then we'll make our way through. So this is a brief one, 45 seconds, and I will be a bit more militant than I have been up to this point with timekeeping. So go ahead, Robert. Oh, but only if we can hear you.
There was a time when our mayor was the head of the C40 mayors across the world on environmental issues. Right now, we have a mayor, I'd say, who's not very visible on this, and I certainly would be. We need a platform that encourages people to electrify, whether it's stoves, furnaces, cars, the city, its fleet, the fleet that it licenses, taxis and ride shares. We need to get on board on efficiency. Canada is probably the worst in the world on efficiency for energy and water, and we can do so much. Induction stoves and heat pumps are really the solution for most homes. And we need leadership at the provincial and federal level, and I would be supporting parties that are in favor of carbon pricing, building code changes in Ontario. That's where they are, and they're not happening. And
thank you. Did we have, I think Phil had raised your hand as well. Go for it.
Okay, 2015, the city signed a emergency green act, right? They got a goal to meet the green, whatever. It's not gonna work. The number's not gonna work. First of all, you need people to educate it. I think educate green, work green, share green. Presentation in high school, convince people, show people the difference between how your parents lived back then, how you can live now. Because all the kids in the future, they're going to be working green. Toronto's not going to meet the standards. They keep telling all this crap, we're going to meet the goal and all. It's not going to happen. I was at a climate conference with Mike Layton. He says the attitude is not at the right time. The right time should have been 2015 back then. We're too late. We got to catch up with this mayor and this only incumbents. It's not going to happen. It's all talk right now and all show. You know, we need.
Thank you. Darren, I think your hand was raised as well. And we'll just make sure that we can hear you too.
Okay, we're unmuted. Well, anyone who looked at my LinkedIn account might realize one unusual aspect of how I've raised funds for my artistic endeavors in the past. If you look at the Forbes or the Wired article, ultimately, at the end of the day, one thing I'll speak to is recycling. When only less than 10% of the plastic gets recycled, one of the things to do is just stop the carbon handover. don't let people sell products that are packaged in plastic. When you take into consideration very little plastic is recycled and all the energy of all of our programs and all the people that clean it, separate it, it's a waste. Ultimately we can have some fees on it, maybe collect some money. I'm sorry, just going to make people pay if they're not going to be good corporate citizens or good citizens, good retailers, whatnot. That would be the one thing I could speak to, and I know all about that. And really, if people keep handing us carbon footprints, well, we should reject it with fees, or we just simply make it impossible for them to actually do business in a way that hands us that carbon footprint. Two-stroke engines in construction.
Thank you. And I think everyone's hands are pretty much up, so we will turn next to Sarah for this 45-second answer.
Thank you. I think basically the city has to be a model for what it wants. And so every machine that we use, we need to question, do we ever need to buy new machines? Can we stop using them? Can we use people power instead? That instantly has a big impact on carbon. Our politicians should be using transit. Our politicians should be biking. Our politicians should be leading with what they want to see in the world. That's going to actually have a positive impact on our residents. And then the other thing I think is it's very important for us to speak, especially politicians and people in power, to speak not about international agreements and this percent of that and this kind of admission and language that's for people who are just struggling to make ends meet or find childcare. It's not meaningful to them. But if we talk about clean air, clean water, planting trees, having shade, not having too much heat, not having smog, these are actions that everyone can get behind. Talking about international.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm fair. I'm even cutting off the host of this. Okay, Chloe, let's turn to you next. And we'll just make sure that you're unmuted.
So starting early in TDSB, DSB, making sure that they actually get access to the parks, they can do their own green projects. Right now, the economy is already on the way to greening. So it's just about making sure that people can buy into this by giving them the tax credits to buy these environmental goods, giving them the space to also make their own inventions, because there are so many different cultures that take different approaches to greening the economy. And we need to create space for them in terms of 3D labs, wet labs, dry labs, etc. And then last but not least, like Sarah's saying, let's not focus on the international scope. We have the talent here to green our own city, and we're going to have to take different approaches based on our climate, etc. And then rezoning land for vertical gardens, pollinator gardens, and different types of green projects across Etobicoke, Scarborough, and North York. Done.
There we go. Thank you. Isabella, let's turn to you next.
Okay. All right. Hi. So we was talking about taxing churches. Well, maybe we should think about taxing the federal and the provincial buildings. They do use our water supplies. Their sewage does go through our treatment plants. Maybe they should be taxed. I agree that products that are imported to Canada or made in Canada should be recyclable, 90 to 95% recyclable. I think that companies that make their products 90 to 95% recyclable maybe could get tax breaks. Other ones who aren't doing that, their products aren't recyclable, should maybe get taxed for how much they're not recyclable. E-races, such as the Indy, we don't need carbon powered races going around Toronto when we could have electronic races. They can have electric race cars. This modern, we have a problem.
Thank you, Isabella. I actually would love to see scooter races myself. Okay, fine. Hold on, but you have to unmute.
We have a problem with noise in the city, and motorcycles and high-end sports cars whipping around. One person disturbing thousands of people in their trip around the city, is unnecessary. If there was a sound radar, we could use sound radar and issue tickets that way. And what we should encourage, maybe we could probably put a ban on them in the city, these loud cars and motorcycles, and force the manufacturers to quieten them down.
Thank you. So back to you. The question, just as a reminder, how would you push the city to meet its commitments on the international stage?
So there's a couple things that can be done, but I'm going to just mention two of them. So the first part is increasing the green spaces that we have in Toronto. So the main thing right now to help improve how the usage of energy and resources and things like that is the space that we use. And it is important that we address the space that we use and then utilize in a way that doesn't require us to use more energy unnecessarily. And then, so in doing this, for example, it would be to increase the green spaces in different areas of Toronto outside of downtown, and then getting people to move into those areas. And the second part is improving services that contribute to fossil fuels and stuff. So improving TDC and all of these other transit services, for example, so that way people are more encouraged to use the public transit rather than using their cars. And then putting resources to make that happen.
Nia, I don't know that I saw your hand, but did you want to weigh in on this question since everyone else took a shot? Let's go for it.
Thank you. Yes, to push Toronto to meet its commitments on the international stage, it's going to take a representative of our city who can gain the trust of our city and who can actually speak to the issues everyday Torontonians think about. And we have to, as mayor, I would make sure that the suggestions are practicable and that the public understands the benefits of meeting these commitments. Zero food waste is one of the most important things with so much homelessness and poverty and people relying on food banks. It just has to be presented to our city as a way to say, we can improve the results of our city. We can save money. We can gain and gain more people to want to live here and increase our basic ability for Toronto to be a world-class #1 city. So it's through advocacy, through representation. There's no one specific way. It's really through presentation as the mayor to show our members of Toronto why these things are important and how they benefit the city as a whole.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question so that we can end relatively on time. And this is an interesting one. So I'll just read it out as it appears in the chat and then leave it to the candidates if they want to take a crack at answering. The question is, all you candidates have good ideas, but what are your chances of beating John Tory? How will you engage with voters in the next few weeks to try and motivate them and ensure that John Tory never wins an election again? I'm disappointed by the turnout at this debate and feel despair about the democracy of this city. I will say that there is also a live stream happening, but I can't speak to the numbers. And of course, in a city of 3 million people, it's a small but mighty crowd. Are there any candidates who want to tackle this thought-provoking question? Okay, that's everyone. So we will just go dealer's choice. I'm going to start with you, Chloe. And just make sure that you are unmuted and same deal, 45 seconds to answer.
So thank you for that comment. It's really nice to have good ideas, but at the end of the day, I cannot force voters to get to the polls. I can only encourage them. At this point, everyone's an adult and we have the responsibility as adults to find our way to the polls between October 7th to the 14th, when there's advanced polling from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then there's the 24th of October from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. again. I personally cannot knock 3 million doors. I work during the daytime to make sure that my rent is paid and I don't end up the homeless that I'm trying to help. And this is where, like, we need you as voters to turn this into a chain letter and tell 10 friends and they tell 10 friends and they tell 10 friends. We got to get back to the community word of mouth because it's the most powerful tool of anything that we've ever built. Social media is just the digitalization of our voices. It is up to us to pull out our neighbors, our friends, our families out of their houses and stand up in that line once every 4 years to make sure that the John Torys of the world stop squeezing us like lemons. It is time. I cannot.
Thank you. That was a good, strong metaphor at the end. Phil, let's go to you next. And just want to make sure you're unmuted. Perfect.
Yeah, it's hard. There's no media coverage. My suggestion is, whoever's watching, look at everybody's platforms, read what we all stand for. A lot of us done videos, I've done visuals, and compared to John Tory's the last years, what he's done for the city. Look at our ideas. You've heard us talking. We all got one heart to help the city. It's not like it's a power controls, power trips. Word of mouth, like Chloe said, I did canvassing or all awards twice in about 5 months. Can't talk knock on every door, but word of mouth gets around, helping people out. Just who we are. We're real people. We got a heart, we want to help the city. We're not here for power trips or making impressions or photo ops. I'm not a photo op guy. There's an old saying, for every John Tory photo op, one person dies on the street. We don't want that, Forget the photo ops, just get the job done. We all get the job done. Take pictures.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go to Nia next.
Thank you. It is going to be hard to beat John Tory, but that's for a specific reason. It's because the media has chosen to select John Tory as our next mayor. They have not given any of us as candidates the opportunity to express themselves. John Tory has eliminated himself from debates. So all I can say that I will do is continuously put out information via social media. I will do my best to attend every debate and engage voters. But what's most important is try to convey to the voters of Toronto, it's up to them to actually investigate the candidates and select a new mayor, not to allow the media to dictate to them what they believe is going to happen. So it's really about engagement, but we're up against a brick wall, and it's only going to be through our collective endeavors, such as Sarah holding this debate today, and everyone participating, that we're going to make a change and a difference. And that's what I intend to do, is communicate every day as often as possible. Thank you. And I apologize, I have to go back to my legal matters. So thank you for everyone for allowing me to be here. Thank you.
Take care. Isabella, would you like to answer this next? Just a refresher. The question is, how do we go about beating John Tory? What are your plans to get the word out? And yeah, that's Stacey.
Yeah, well, being a trans woman and an anti-poverty activist, I face a lot of transphobia and ableism, people telling me to get a job. I'm disabled, so it's hard for me to go knocking on doors. I only have so many good hours in a day that I can be mobile and functioning. I don't have money for mass flyering, relying on word of mouth. I don't have a campaign manager. I'm thinking about doing some stump speeches and maybe inviting other people to come out and do some public stump speeches on some city corners. But honestly, some people are going to have to step down, and they're going to have to quit and endorse others, because that's the only way we're going to stand a chance. And, we have to have somebody that's actually going to fight and actually get things done. I prove that I fight for people. I block streets. I blocked a street last Wednesday in front of the ODSPOW office at 111 Wellesley Street, East in Toronto, for 2 hours from 2 till 4 p.m. I'm out there fighting. I've been fighting for people for the last 4 years to have ODSP and OW doubled. I've been fighting for against homelessness. I'm fighting for the environment. I would face protesters as mayor because I am a protester. So I would love people to fall in behind me and endorse me, because.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Soad next.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Chloe. So unfortunately, I'm working right now. So as we're doing all this, I'm also working. I'm also having to deal with work stuff. And so basically, the way that I'm kind of approaching this right now is basically getting word of mouth, doing promotions and using different avenues, so different communication channels, social media, and handing out flyers and all those other kinds of tactics that we use for marketing. And then also being able to just promote the elections on every front, making people understand what the importance of the election is and how it's going to impact them in their lives, and then promoting how the aftermath of what we've seen the last election and what's happening right now, and then making people kind of see for themselves how the election actually does make a difference, whether it's for the good or for the bad.
Thank you. Robert, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. We all struggle with it. I haven't given up on the mainstream media yet. I have this optimism that if you put forward good ideas and show yourself to be a credible candidate, that sooner or later they're going to notice you. But I have to say that, there are also the option of crazy stunts that draw attention to you that they can't ignore. I'm not going there yet, but maybe I'll have to. In the meantime, I'm riding around town on a motorcycle with a flag out the back, which is as crazy as I'm going to get at the moment. And I'm on Twitter all over the place, hattonformayor.ca.
Thank you. And Darren, did you want to weigh in on this question?
Well, I may have an example. I went to Indigenous Day at Nathan Phillips Square, and what you have to do is literally get in their face. Mayor Tory was, decent enough to take my card, and I challenged him to take myself onto one of the debates or somebody else. I also met the Finance Minister of Canada, and if I could have met more people, I would have. I also talked to CTV reporters who actually did a good job in challenging Mayor Tory and his conflict of interest with Rogers. So you have to physically go out and literally be in front of them, in front of the media, phone into the media, meet the people, challenge them again and again and again. And we need hundreds of people. And then they'd be so uncomfortable, they'd have to face it. You need to get out in the flash and push. That's probably the only way.
Thank you. And we will, I guess, end this question with Sarah.
Thanks. So first of all, when all we can control is our own chances. So when I'm going to the poll, I have 100% chance of beating John Tory because I'm going to be the one who's voting. And so I think when we each just focus on ourselves, that's where our energy lies. That's where we can get things done. The biggest voting block in Toronto is the non-voters block. And a lot of the reason for non-voters is because they don't really think it can make a difference. So that's one reason. So if you believe that someone's chances aren't good and you don't want to vote, you lose the opportunity to make us to say what you want. And so I think that that's all we all need to concentrate on is we say what we want, we share it, and then what people do is totally up to them. I think that there is always value in speaking up, and that's why I think we're all doing it. And so I'm not worried about my chances. All I'm worried about is, am I saying what I want? So that's my time up for that question. I just wanted to thank everyone so much for participating in this. It's really exciting. There are people watching here. There's people watching on YouTube. There'll be more people who watch afterwards. Your ideas are getting heard. And for anyone who's here today or who's listening on this debate and you don't hear an answer to the question you have, all of us have some way you can get in touch with us, whether it's Twitter, email, or our websites. Get in touch with us. Ask us your questions. And like Chloe says, that was the best word of mouth speech I ever heard. Word of mouth is so powerful. So get out there and say what you have to say. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And to the candidates, Darren Atkinson, Chloe Brown, Sarah Kleiman-Haig, Philip DeCruz, Isabella Gamick, Sawad Hussain, Robert Hatton, Nia Singh. Those are the names who you have heard today. Do check out their social media presences, their platforms. It's not over till it's over, despite what corporate media might have us believe. And thank you all for joining, and anyone who catches this as a rebroadcast. We appreciate your engagement, and the city is better for it. So have a good afternoon, evening to everyone. There is applause, but it's everyone's on mute. So we'll just roll with that. Thank you all.